Hello, good morning and good afternoon, and welcome to this FERMA Live webinar, Risk Managers in a Time of Transition, which will bring you the results of the latest FERMA European Risk Manager Survey. We have actually conducted this every second year since 2001, and it's the first time after the pandemic. So we will see and hear about what is the impact on risk managers, their priorities, and their way of working. My name is Charlotte Hedemark-Hanke. I work as Senior Risk Specialist in SAP, and I work in our Global Risk and Assurance Services. I am a member of DARIM, the Danish Risk Manager Organization. And I will actually moderate the session today with Françoise Berger, PwC partner. And the survey here has been conducted in collaboration with PwC for the third time, actually. So I really would like to thank you, Françoise, and your team for your support all the way through. Just a few seconds to go through some of the practical details. Please note that you can always join the discussions anytime at Twitter by using the hashtag FERMAWebinar. But right now, during the webinar, and I can see we are more than 100 attendees, please, we would really like to hear from you. So please ask questions, share your comments, even challenge our ideas, and use the chat box, which is a function you have here in the GoToWebinar player. If we go to the agenda, you can see, we will spend a few minutes on the introduction. And then if you move to the next slide to the agenda, you will see that we will spend a majority of our time on results and comments from our panelists. And last but not least, we will have a Q&A session. But before we start, I would like to present our three panelists. First of all, I would like to present Carl-Johan Rodert, who is Group Risk Manager, Captive and Insurance at Autoliv, which is a worldwide leader in automotive safety. He's also the president of FERMA, the Swedish Risk Management Association. And then we have Marco Terzago. Marco is a risk and insurance manager at SKF, the world's largest bearing manufacturer. And he's also a board member of ANRA, the Italian Risk Management Association. I think also I would like to mention that Marco is or holds the REMAP European Risk Management certification. And then I would also like to introduce Oliver Wild. Oliver is Group Chief Risk and Insurance Officer at Veolia, which is the global leader in optimized resource management. Olivier is also the president of the French Risk Management Association, AMAE. So before further ado, I would like to give the floor to you, Françoise.
Yes, and thank you, Charlotte. It is a very pleasure to present to you today, as Charlotte mentions, the 11th edition of the survey, which has been run by FERMA for the 20 last years. All the 22 member associations of FERMA and PwC offices throughout Europe have joined their effort to facilitate the distribution of the questionnaire during the first quarter of this survey. And we had, and thank you to all the participants which we may have into this session today, all 556 risk managers who completed the questionnaire from 27 countries. What we can see is that the main contributing countries were France, Germany, Italy, Sweden, and Belgium, each representing about 10% of the panel. This year, we have introduced a very important feature to our approach, and I would like to thank the 20 risk managers who participate into 2 workshops we held once we had received the results, and in the preparation of this display of the results, they have helped us analyze the responses to the questionnaire, and what we present to you today are the results of those discussions. But before going through the presentation of the results, we would like to highlight something about the very special period that we have been through over the last 2 years. The survey that have been run by FERMA during these periods between 2020 and 2022 have highlighted the role of the risk managers in managing the major crises that have struck during this period. Firstly, the COVID crisis, and lastly, the Ukraine war, which struck Europe more than other region in the world. And this has been a very intensive period for risk managers, and it has also been a period of consolidation of the position of the risk manager within the organization, as we will highlight in the results. Charlotte, maybe if you want to take the floor to introduce the profile of our respondent.
Absolutely, and I hope we can go to full screen with the PowerPoint presentation. It's in a very small text, at least when I'm looking at it, and I'm sorry for that. Okay. So when we look at the profile of the respondents, if the FERMA team can move to the next slide. Thank you. We see that the average proportion of women risk managers is unchanged since 2018, actually with 32%. However, when you look at the proportion of the risk managers under 30 years, this has significantly increased from 52% in 2020 to 61% today. So women are now making the majority in this age group. Risk management actually continues to be a profession for the experienced, with 64% between 36 and 55. The most experienced risk managers, when you look at that part of the slide, they work in insurance risk management with 47% of the respondents, and they are having more than 10 years of experience, while almost 50% of the ERM risk management profiles have between 5 and 10 years experience. So when you then look at the ERM and insurance risk management function, there the experience level is more even. If we then should look a little bit more on the profile of the respondents and see in which type of organizations they work in, you can see on the next slide here that in terms of scope of activities, enterprise risk managers represented 33% of the respondents. Meanwhile, the insurance risk managers represented 37%. And for those risk managers having both titles, they represent 28% of the respondents. Then looking at the sectors that risk managers are working in, we see that the risk management position is still mainly in large firms, meaning 80%. But indeed, in a smaller company, it will probably be a manager who has other responsibilities, such as a CFO in an SME, who usually also conducts risk management. When you look at the most represented sector of activity, you can see it's the industry with 57% of the respondents, and followed by financial services with 25% and services 14%. Only 4% of the respondents are actually coming from the public sector. And here I would like just to pause a minute and ask any of our panelists if you would like to react on the way you see here the profile of the European risk manager. Well,
so without any comment, maybe I go to the risk landscape. Yes, and please. That arose from the questionnaire. It is the landscape, that post-COVID landscape really is threefold in what you see on the chart. Firstly, what we see is cyber attacks remain at the central threat by far in the concern of the risk managers. Secondly, what we can see is that directly linked to the crisis post-COVID and Ukraine, we have a group of risks that arose, and those risks being, for example, supply chain, being geopolitical instability, uncertainty about economic growth, and that we can see somehow about the regulation. Thirdly, we have a group of risks arising from the multiple transitions that the organizations are going through. climate change, of course, technology change, customer behavior change, and to some extent, regulation also. Now, if we look to the next slide with what happens when we consider the time horizon for those top risks. We see, as was highlighted in the introduction, that cyber threat is really top for the short and medium term in the top 3 altogether. We see also, and that is something that is maybe something to be noted, that changing customer behavior is a key concern in the medium and long term. And then some kind of highlight feature is that climate only appears on top of the long-term risk. If we go back to the short-term risk, we have here a list of 5 topics that has rose at top. And as we see, the supply chain today, a main concern of the organization, is ranked second. Geopolitical uncertainties, and we can understand why, is ranked third. Similarly, uncertain economic growth, and eventually overregulation. If we look at the climate change position in this short-term risk, it is third to the last. So it is, and that's something maybe we would like to come back afterwards. With the medium-term risks, they are, the third one is the third 3 top ones on the short terms are mainly no change, with unless uncertainty about economic growth has rose to the third position. Now, something that is interesting to compare those results with is the top 5 risks lacking management attention according to the risk managers. And surprisingly, what we see is that those 5 risks, those 5 concerns are some of the top 5 risks that we saw on the previous charts. So the first one is climate change. Cyber threats is ranked second. Geopolitical uncertainty third. Speed of technological change fourth, and changing customer behavior fifth. Here, it is somewhat worrying to see that our respondents rank on top of the risk lacking management attention, the risk that also rank the most critical. So I would like maybe, Oliver, if you can jump in, just comment to us, could you help us understand why and whether it is indeed, whether it is worrying? Do we have Oliver on the presentation?
I'm not sure if he was in a panelist in the meeting yet, so.
Oh, all right. So maybe we will give a few minutes more for Oliver to join us. And given the landscape that we shared, maybe Marco, would you like to, and if we come back to the slide, yeah, would you like to comment to us the trend that we see about the risk on the change of customer behavior, which is ranked very high on the medium and the long term?
Yes, I think that it's a quite interesting piece of news, and I think I would have expected for sure to see it not only as a top risk for the next 3 years, but I would say also as of now. It's true that we have other urgencies like, of course, the supply chain or distribution failures or geopolitical uncertainties that are more up to date as of risk. But I would say that this is something that is an effect that probably the respondents have highlighted to a medium or long term, based on the fact that the world has basically completely changed. It is something like the 9/11 change, the one that we have had because of the pandemic and because of the war crisis that we are, unfortunately, the tragedy that we are living on. We are talking about an acceleration in some cases, or a complete change in the customer behavior. And of course, this is a strategic risk that all the corporations have to face. That means a change from, I would say, delivering products to delivering service. So it's a transformation into servitization. That is something that, for instance, my corporation is facing well in advance before the pandemics, but it's something that is accelerated, just to name one. And of course, the supply chain crisis has also accelerated some of the trends that we were seeing just as a short before the pandemic. So I think that it's a very, very interesting I would say thing that is popping up, this changing customer behavior seen as a top risk in the next 3 years and in the next 10 years, I would say. So something to think about for companies and for risk managers, helping the companies to leverage on the strategic risks.
All right. So maybe for the FERMA team, if you can go back to the next page on the top risk lacking management attention. Yes. So as I think we don't have Oliver with us, a comment on this page. As we see, the top 5 risks lacking management attention are some of the top 5 risks overall. And what we can take from this results is that there are 2 ways that risk managers are estimating the way of the involvement of management into the risk. The first one is on the awareness of the risk. We see that some of the risk, and we can relate this lack of management attention to some of the risk. And however, and that may be the case for the climate change, for example, where we have noticed that on the short term, the risk doesn't rank on top of the concerns, but rather on the long term. So, and on the other side, what the lack of management attention might also come from the response and the ability to maintain a high level efficiency of the response, which requires on the long term management attention. So we have those 2 kinds of concerns with the involvement of management and the first line of defense into the risk management. Before we jump to the next section, maybe Carl-Johan, if you would like, do you have any comment to make to those results in comparison to what you see in the Nordic countries?
I can just comment, and I don't think that the results are that different from what we would see from a strict Nordic perspective. I would probably think that it would be similar to what has been reported now. And just to comment on the lacking of management attention, I'm not surprised that climate change has the top position there, considering that actual events that has affected companies that is directly connected to climate change hasn't been that many yet. So that's more of a type of a future risk that management try to, thinking about, what should we look at as a risk in the future. And what I'm seeing right now is more that the risk for climate change is rather not the effect of climate change, but rather, if we don't live up to our promises, how will consumers behave in regards to our company, and that might come into that changing consumer behavior portion instead of climate change. And then, well, cyber threat is just changing rapidly, and with the insurance market, moving the way it has the last 2 years with reducing capacity, reducing wording, and increasing premiums significantly, new clients not being able to buy cyber insurance even. So, this is probably rising and the attention of management, but I don't think we're seeing getting enough attention, because we're still seeing a lot of movement here in regards to risk to companies.
All right. Thank you. Charlotte, would you like to take over the next one?
Let's have a look on how the risk manager's presence in the organization has evolved, and also on the interaction within the organization. So if we move to the next slide, we will see that the COVID crisis has actually brought the risk management closer to the boardroom, and they are also more involved now in strategic processes, not only dealing with risks, but also dealing with other processes. 91% of the risk managers are actually involved in corporate strategy, either fully, mostly, or partially. This was only 60% 2 years ago. So these findings here are actually quite in line with the previous survey, or the recent survey FERMA conducted on corporate resilience, which also showed that the coronavirus pandemic raised the profile of risk and insurance management considerably, and also raised the profile of corporate resilience. In that previous, or this other survey, we saw 90% of the respondents stating that the pandemic actually made risk and insurance management more important to the organizations. So that's worth a reflection, I think. So how concretely are risk managers involved? So if you look here onto the right side of the slide, you see that 61% review the strategic risks, 40% contributes in the corporate strategy definition, i.e. conducting risk workshops, and 40% works on sustainability risks and impacts, 37% on disruption risk, and 33% work on different other scenarios of the business plan. If we should look a little bit on the governance, so if you go to more detail, if you go to the next slide, you will also see here that the position of the risk manager in the governance is now consolidated. Actually, the risk management function takes part in a various or different committees, as you can see here within the organization. A majority, 51, or most of the presence is still in the risk committee, 56%, 39% in the audit committee, and 34% in the executive committee. And then we also saw, and we got some statements back saying that 39% of the respondents, they state that they can contact the CEO directly or indirectly, and 36% of the risk manager actually present to the board more than once a year. So actually, the COVID-19 crisis did impact the frequency of risk discussions at board level, top management level, for almost 75% of the respondents, as you can see here, whereas 13% really states it's to a large extent. So maybe I would like to ask the panelists if you would like to share some of your experience here. Maybe you, Marco, can you see, or can you tell us, enlighten a little bit how you have seen the role of the risk managers involved in your country over the past 2 years?
Yes, sure. I totally agree that the COVID-19 pandemics has, helped in getting the boardrooms more used to involve, the risk management functions were existing in the discussion on how to deal with the pandemics, because this is a typical multi-dimensional risk where health and safety for the people are involved, but also business continuity is involved. And I do think that Italy has had, of course, the unlucky part of being one of the first and most seriously hit countries in Europe. So we had to learn from a few other countries, I would say mainly China, how to deal with the disaster that was upcoming. And I think that this has helped my colleagues and myself to be more heard by the boardrooms. Of course, it has to be said that in Italy the situation compared to northern countries is not ideal. So I would say that in my best knowledge, also talking with the UNRWA peers, it's not so common that risk management department contribute in defining, for instance, key risk indicators that are driving the strategy of the companies. But for sure, what I can say is that this whole situation is making the things better. So the boardrooms are more aware that we live in a fragile world and we need to have a risk-based thinking in our decisions.
Thank you, Marco. Karl-Johan, would you like to come with a comment for the, let's say, for the role of the risk managers in the Nordic countries? Have you seen any trend here?
Yeah, I haven't seen the exact results from the Nordic countries from this survey, so this will just be my feeling of how things are. But I can see the same movement. The risk management topic is certainly moving up in attention on boards and management. Seeing the extent on how good that type of work is to do preparative risk management, and that's, I think, is one of the important things. We see a really good trend here with the COVID-19 crisis impacting top management level to engage in risk management, but to make sure that it's not just for in a crisis event, but rather to have risk management engaged all over the year, even when we're not in a crisis, to make sure that you can prepare for such crisis in a better way for the future. I think, and I hope that's the way we are moving.
Thank you. So, Françoise, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yes, if we go to the role of the risk managers in sustainability, the first figures that we would like to comment is a growth in the number of risk managers that are playing a role in the ESG-related risks in the organization. What we see is that in 2020, 40%, less than half of the risk managers panel were involved or planning to be involved into the ESG risks. And today, when we conducted the survey in 2022, more than half, and exactly 56% of the risk managers are involved or are planning to be involved. This is obviously in line with the growing focus on ESG matters in the economic landscape as a whole, but still the risk management, the risk assessment and the risk management is taking the same focus. How are the risk managers involved? Largely and mainly into the analysis of the risk through the mapping of the risks. There is also a large and almost 3/4 of the risk managers who are involved into the definition of the prevention and the adaptation measures to cope with climate change and the residual risk mitigation. What we see is that 60% are also involved with the reporting and the external reporting on sustainability, on corporate sustainability reporting, and this is a growing concern for organizations, and risk managers are involved into this. If we go to the next slide, what we see is that 82% of the risk managers collaborate with the CSR team in their organization. And what's interesting, in light of the first figures I commented on the growing role, we see that the shift of the dark bars that were more on the occasional collaboration and no relationships, that they are today in the minority for the regular. So we have a growing, and as we see, the growing role is also linked to the relationship and the collaboration with the CSR team in the organization, with almost 1/3 of the risk management teams having close collaboration with the CSR team, and 43% occasional collaboration. On the next page, we focus on the climate change risk. As we noticed, it is in the long term the first risk, the first concern, on top of the risks for the long-term risks. And if we look at how risk managers are in practice involved into this risk and what they are doing, the first is about risk identification. And more than half of them, of the panel, is having a risk map into the risk map and working on the risk identification. More than 40% are working on the transitional risks, i.e. the strategy that organizations have defined to manage and cope with the transition. What are the risks attached to the success of this strategy? The next two activities that risk managers have in relation with climate change risks is about assessment of the risks. And what we see is that more than 1/3 of the risk managers are working on climate change scenario, and also about 1/3 are working on the quantification, the financial quantification of the impact of the risks, which is an important part. Only 15% of the panelists do not work on climate change risk. The last figures we would like to share on this topic, and that somehow also highlight some of the trends with the previous ones, are the challenges that risk managers see in integrating sustainability into the risk management process. And we commented that a growing number of risk managers are involved into the assessment of the risk, and this is for them a key challenge in terms of quantitative assessment, but also qualitative assessment. Quantitative assessment ranking first for half of the panelists, and second, and the difficulty of qualifying the risk, identifying the risk second. What we have also is on the third, linked also to the difficulty of identifying and assessing the risk, the limited knowledge of the risk management teams on sustainability risks, and eventually on the two last items that managers see that the greatest challenge for risk for them, we have the time horizon. And this is also interesting in light of the results we had, showing that climate risk is only on top of the long-term risks. However, there are strategies, and that was Marco, as mentioned by Marco, there are strategies, short-term strategies to cope with the change of the climate, of the climate. So managing those short-term, long-term transition and physical assessment of events that will happen is a challenge for the organization and the risk management teams to manage. Eventually, we have 5th and 20% of our panelists who find that there are limited collaboration with the ESG team. So to comment on this and looking at the figures, maybe can we have one of you, Marco or Karl-Johan, commenting on what are the means of the risk managers to support the company towards climate change resilience? If you have some comment into it.
If I can start here, I would say that of course sustainability is a fantastic opportunity. It's a landscape. It's something that it's really a risk in the real definition given by the ISO guide 73. So it's really something that is threatening the objective of the company objectives, and it's also a great opportunity. So it's only one way to go, that is to deal with this risk and opportunity in a strategic way. So starting from the fact that of course risk of environment, social and governance have to be, you know, of course mapped into the risk register. Of course, the other opportunity, especially for Italian companies, that we have not so many, you know, huge and big companies, but our, you know, our enterprises are small SMEs. Then it's a great opportunity for people who are dealing with risk to also, you know, expand their view on sustainability. It is a bit different if I compare with my company, that is a Swedish multinational, where of course those subjects are dealt with by, you know, huge organizations, and of course there is no opportunity, I would say, to actually deal directly with those risks, but of course the opportunities to integrate and to work together face to face with professionals in the sustainability area have increased. So once again, it's a big opportunity. It's a train we should not miss at all. And of course, the size of the company is providing some sort of constraints sometimes, but for sure, it's a train not to be missed by the risk management community.
Yeah.
Thank you, Marco. And yes, Caroline?
Yes, quickly. Yeah, I agree with Marco. It's just to comment that it's a great opportunity for lots of companies if you can move into, you know, the sustainability area and see the business opportunities that are with that. But in terms of where the risk management role can support the ESG group in looking at these risks, well, it's going to go both ways. They can teach about the ESG risks in general to us, and then back we can help with both our own ability to assess risks in general, but also the different tools that we can access you know, different insurance companies and brokers that have really good tools in looking at how climate change will affect different areas in the world and things like that, and that can help making, you know, assessment of how climate change will affect, you know, local factories or things that you might have around the world, and make climate change risk assessment based on those tools as well.
Mm-hmm. Right.
François, I think also, let's say, in if I can comment as well, as risk manager in our company, not only of course sustainability is on the top agenda, but in terms of risk management, my experience is that already now in the reporting that we see this requirement that we need to move towards a European harmonized way of reporting. And in the last 2 board reporting cycles I've been part of, we are already now adding additional chapters on sustainability and risk assessment in that kind of report.
Right. And sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I would maybe just like to use this opportunity to excuse on behalf of Oliver Wilde. He is not able to join us at all, so
okay.
We apologize for that.
And Charlotte, your comment is in light also of the in the first figures we showed that 60% of our panelists are involved indeed in the external reporting and working on the reporting of those risks. So going from sustainability to digital transformation, one of our other transitions, big transformations and transitions that our organizations are going through. The first figures we would like to comment on is first what kind of usage that the risk managers have of data analytics. And the first one is in the data analytics, with more than 60% of the panel using technology for this. We have more than half of the panelists that have deployed or implemented web-based application to monitor and manage the risks. And then we have a second level, I would say, of usage. The first one being data visualization, and the fourth one being process automation, which is only for 20% of the panelists. If we go to the center of the slide, we have here the figures about technological skills that the risk managers can leverage on. And the first source of skills is internal to the organization, although not internal to their team, because as we see, this is only the second source of skills, and it's for 1/3 of the organization, relying on internal skills. Dedicated digital teams that organization have put in place is 43% of our panelists. What we see is that only 10%, or 11 exactly, 11% of the panelists do not have access to technological skills, and should they have the skills internally. Some of them have access to external sources, and that's for 10% of them. So what we see is that today, a large number of the risk manager, more than 3/4, have access to technological skills to develop usage of technology into the way they are working with supporting the organization with risk management. This being said, they see obstacles in the use of technologies. And the first one is the heavy investment required when deploying such technologies. The second one is the lack of perceived added value. And I think it's interesting to relate those two, because if you add up heavy investment and lack of perceived value, that's indeed a big barrier to the development of such technology within the organization for our risk managers. The third one, which is also, if we look at the items at large, is also a major concern. If it adds to the second, to the first two, it's the low maturity of the organization, which is only for 1/4 of the respondents, because as we see in organizations, there is the maturity of a technology, and the technology transformation is more and more, I would say, embedded into the activities of the organizations at large. So if we go to the next one, and if we go deeper on how risk managers deal with emerging technologies, so another, not using technology for their way of working, but considering the development and the deployment of new technologies in the organization as a source of risk, what we see is that what do risk managers for those risks is that 35% of them are involved in the identification and the assessment of the risk prior to the adoption of the new technology in the business. So 32% of them are involved in the assessment while the technology is indeed used by the organization, we have 1/3 of the panel who does not have any action with regard to the assessment of the risk emerging from technology, and 1/4, I would say, of the panelists have a role into analyzing and the remediation and remediating with regard to the insurance coverage. And if we go to the right-hand side of the slide and the interaction with the IT organization security and security, it is a role that has been consolidated over the years. And the risk managers have regular and close collaboration with those teams. And there is a clear mandate with regard to it. 40%, between 30 and 40% have occasional collaboration. And we have only a very small percentage with no collaboration involved. What is interesting to see, and that was one comment of the risk managers who helped us understand the results, as I was mentioning, the 2 workshops that we held at the beginning of this presentation, is that indeed it's been now some time the risk managers and the IT departments or the IT teams are working together to analyze the risk, understand the risk, deploy and define risk mitigation measures. And today we see a trend of IT teams which have embedded the risk assessment into the deployment of their new technologies. So the effort needed from the risk management to support the IT team is less, as IT teams have developed risk assessment skills. And that was one comment of our panelists of risk managers who attended the workshops. This landscape about risk, the role of risk managers with digital transformation being put forward, maybe if we can have, there is a comment, Karl-Johan, about the role of the risk managers with regard to analyzing the capacity with insurance and any insurance coverage gaps. Would you have a comment on this?
So was that a comment now, or?
Yes, please, go ahead. On the left-hand side, as we see that 1/4 of the risk managers are involved with the remediation of any insurance coverage gaps. Do you have any comment on this, or do you have that you would like to raise?
No, sorry, I don't really understand the question around it. Sorry.
Okay, sorry, that doesn't matter. But what we see is that indeed, because of the difficulty of finding insurance and having insurance coverage for some of the technological risks, we see that we have risk managers that are involved into identifying remediation measures or other ways to cover the risks. Yeah. And this is a matter that we would come back with regard to the insurance topic that Charlotte will develop. But with regard to this 1/4 of the risk managers being involved into this, do you have any comment?
Yeah, I think it's becoming more natural that they are becoming involved, considering how the insurance market has moved. As I said a little bit earlier, that with premiums are going up, it's more difficult to find insurance. That means that companies that start seeing the risk will probably find other measures to mitigate and try to find other securities for IT and information security. So it's feels like a natural move that it also would bring a good effect, that it would be easier going forward actually finding insurance solutions as well. So it's a win-win.
Okay. Another comment you shared with us during the preparation of this webinar is about the investment in new technologies and the level of maturity of the risk management in the organization. Can you comment maybe further on this?
Yeah, and I think that connects also with some previous slides that we showed, where when you have a less perceived less maturity within the organization means less perceived gain from investments, and the investments start to feel a little bit too heavy, and this goes the same for this type of investments. So that brings it back to the risk assessment maturity within the company could actually, if that lacks, then that could bring down investments in all types of areas, and IT and cybersecurity included. So that's, it's interesting to see the same results here as the other slide.
Maybe Charlotte, if you want to go to the last section.
Yes, so I wanted actually maybe to ask Marco if you have any comments you want to put here on the digital transformation.
Yes, I see it as a missed opportunity, I would say, apart from some lucky cases, and the reason is that we all know that in other areas, apart from risk, the use of big data, artificial intelligence, all the more modern tools that are available nowadays are becoming more normal and are becoming a way to provide management, I would say a sound and engineering way to take robust decision. This is not happening that in the same way in risk management, and the reasons are the ones that Carl-Johan has highlighted, and that they are highlighted also from the survey. There is somehow difficulties in finding on the market, off the shelves, some good solution. Of course, you need to spend a lot of efforts, need to spend a lot of time to do a proper requirement analysis, to find out what is a good tool to integrate the different aspects of risk management. So, for instance, also just to work on a system that is able to provide a good integration on the different aspects of risk assessment, for instance, quality, EHS, and loss prevention. It is already a big task, and of course this means resources, time, and of course money. And not all organizations are prepared to spend that much time, to dedicate so much resources, and to spend that much budget for this. That is why we stand where we stand.
Thank you. And actually, you mentioned time. In the interest of time, I think we should move to the last part of the survey results, which actually is related to the hard insurance market conditions, which Carl-Johan, you already have mentioned. Because actually with this survey, it also allows us again to put this light on this triple challenge we have in buying insurance protection that risk managers are facing. First, the higher prices, then the underwriting restrictions, and less capacity. So when we see these trends, you can see that 78% of risk managers are heavily impacted or facing a major impact in terms of increasing premium. 71% are facing a reduction in capacity, and 63% are experiencing limitation and exclusion on specific risks. And going to the next slide, you will also see that this current insurance market conditions we see with higher prices and greater restrictions make the traditional risk insurance transfer mechanism less attractive, and logically push more business into other financing tools such as captives. You will be able to see that on the next slide. There on the next slide, you will see that 73% will retain more risks, 47% will use more is captive or will even create a captive, and 29% will use alternative risk transfer vehicles. And this confirms this actually actual rise that we see of captives by 3 times since 2018. It was 15% in 2018, today it's 47%. Going to the last slide, we also here see that we have asked and the question that 41% of the risk managers actually think that some of the location of business activities will become uninsurable in the future. And among these risks, the main reasons are because of cyber risk. We have discussed this already. And the other reasons that we see here can be either related to disruption of supply chain or availability of raw materials. And then last but not least, the hard market conditions. So I think we have 1 or 2 minutes. Maybe Karl-Johan, would you mention or would you comment here? Can you, for instance, see more business moving into captives also in the Nordic countries?
Yeah, I think it was, managed time here, but it was interesting to see how this movement has changed a little bit just in the near future, close by now, because going back a few years, we started seeing a trend that people were terminating their captives, moving away from captives because it was still a soft market. It was easy to buy insurance, and with Solvency II coming in with lots of regulation and costs that brought to the captives. But then as the market changed so rapidly now in 2 years, the trend is reversed again. But we're still seeing some effects of the Solvency II regulations, even though we have some proportionality movement coming in now that might change and help a little bit for captives, hopefully. But yeah, the trend, if you look at it globally, is certainly to use captives and utilize them in much larger ways.
Thank you very much, Karl-Johan. And I think in the interest of time, I will have to close this webinar. It has come to an end. You have seen here, maybe also in the chat, that you will now be able to download a full set of data. You will be receiving the replay of this webinar within the next 22 hours. But I would actually like to invite you, if you are interested to continue the discussion, I would really like to invite you to the FERMA forum taking place in Copenhagen on the 9th to 11th of October. The registration is free for risk managers, and we have a really fantastic lineup of speakers. You can find more information on the webpage, and you can of course register as soon as you would like to. Last but not least, I also want to mention that if you're REMAP certified, please don't forget to log your 2 points. And then thank you everyone for your attention. Thank you for listening and for viewing this presentation. I would also very much like to thank you, the speakers, Marco and Karl-Johan, and again apologize on behalf of Olivier. And then thank you very much, Françoise. Thank you so much for PwC, your work, and your team. So thank you very much, and have a great day.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.